Hello and welcome to our program, 10 Lessons Learned, where we talk to interesting people from all over the world about their interesting experiences and the lessons they have learned. My name is Siebe Van Der Zee and I'm your host. I'm based in Phoenix, Arizona, in the beautiful Grand Canyon state, where I'm also known as the Dutchman in the desert. Our guest today is Attila Juhasz. Attila Juhasz is an award-winning, multi-million-dollar luxury certified real estate agent. He is located in Scottsdale, Arizona, in the greater Phoenix metropolitan area, which is one of the fastest growing regions in the United States. The real estate market has been booming here for years now, creating opportunities, but also challenges. Attila's background is quite fascinating. He was born and raised in the former communist country of Hungary in Eastern Europe. At the age of 19, in pursuit of a better life, Attila moved to the United States in 1987. That was 2 years prior to the Eastern Bloc, former Soviet Union empire, falling and Hungary turned into a democratic country. Attila, in the United States, then got his master's degree from the Thunderbird School of Global Management at Arizona State University. In his corporate career, Attila has worked in several industries, including in marketing positions for global brands like Puma, sportswear, and Dial Corporation, soap and cleaning products. In his current real estate position, Attila's top priority is to be proactive and guide his clients through one of the most important transactions in their life, buying a house. Hello, Attila. Thank you for joining us. How are you doing?
Hello, Siebe. Thank you so much for the opportunity to chat. And I also want to thank the audience to tuning in. And hopefully it will be nice and interesting. And they will also walk away with some important life lessons.
Well, no doubt about it. You were 19 years old when you left your country and you came to the United States. That must have been a very rough experience. How did that work for you? What was that like?
Well, first of all, it was kind of tough because the decision had to be made very quickly. I was trying to go to a university in Hungary, and my family was always private entrepreneurs, so that was strike one. Also, we were Catholic, which was strike two. When I was 14 years old, I started playing the drums and I ended up joining an anti-communistic alternative rock band. So that was strike three. When I tried to enroll into a university 2 years in a row, the written exams were always good because that was anonymous process. But when it came to the oral exams, I always scored lower just because of my background. And so, I basically had to look for an alternative. And by that time, I was a pretty well accomplished musician, even though it was kind of in the underground scenes. But the largest concert that I've ever played in was like 4,500 people. It was quite significant because there was a movement and I was very happy to be part of it. But when I looked at the future, I said, okay, I don't want to be a musician for the rest of my life. At the same time, I wanted to continue my studies. And that's how the idea came for me to move to the States. But I had to move very quickly. I had 2 weeks to get ready. I remember my dad told me, hey, you have to make up your decision tonight. So I tried to go to sleep and he came into my room in the morning. I'm doing it, but it was challenging because I didn't even speak the language. So growing up in Hungary, we had to learn Russian. In 5th grade, I started learning Russian, which you continue throughout your high school studies. But also being in Hungary, learning German was the second best alternative, especially when you are in the western part of the country. You were able to see some Austrian TV stations. So not only that you were learning a language, but you could actually look at different TV programs. So basically, when I made up my mind, I had 2 weeks of taking some intensive English courses. I showed up in the US, and 2 weeks of English courses are not very much, but it was good enough to help me go to the grocery store and have a basic conversation.
Sure.
But then I took the studies very seriously. I was taking all kinds of English as a second language classes, and within 4 months, I was able to pass the TOEFL test. The studies were very intensive, but that was my goal, to learn English very quickly, because that was the biggest hurdle for me to get from like, okay, I just arrived here and how can I actually enter into a university? You know, even you coming from the Netherlands, your country is like my country. They emphasize on you need to have knowledge of different languages because your country is small, my country is small. So basically, the way you can survive in a global marketplace if you are able to speak multiple languages, because not too many people speak Dutch or Hungarian.
No, you're right. But you went through this when you were 19 and earlier in your life. So it's great how you process that, but that's obviously a challenge, especially at a relatively young age of 19.
Yeah, but at the same time, I really didn't have anything else to focus on. This was my main focus, to learn the language. And as I was making friends, it was becoming easier and easier. And, started slowly reading the newspaper. And I was very notorious about going to all these English as a second language classes. I was able to progress pretty well because I already came with good study habits. There were programs available.
All right, Attila, moving on. Your 10 lessons. Let's start with lesson number 1. Treat the doorman of a company with as much respect as you would give to the president of the company. I'm really curious about your perception of that lesson because I know there's a connection to your father. It's a lesson that we have heard from other guests, but I'm really curious about your specific perception of this lesson that you learned.
So for me, this is the golden rule or the foundation how you conduct yourself. Sometimes you are meeting with people that are less fortunate in life. So I always just try to make sure that you don't prejudge people and treat them kindly. As I'm in real estate right now, I have a fresh example in my mind because yesterday I had a closing. It was a long closing, close to 60 days, which is not very normal. Usually we wrap it up in about 30 days. Very early on, I realized that there is something funky about this agent because the way he was communicating, the way he was assuming things and wanted to build in buffer for this and that, it just made me feel like he was not very experienced. So what I have done is I researched his background because I can do research on the MLS and it showed that, he had decent amount of success, but then still I didn't understand why everything was after hours. And very quickly I found out that he's moonlighting as a real estate agent. He was actually working for a large corporation during the day, and he was helping out some of his family and friends and colleagues doing these transactions. It's very difficult, especially after you have a long day and try to relax in the evening, and suddenly his text messages and the emails were coming in, or he's calling me after 5 p.m. and I'm trying to spend time with the family or do dinner or play tennis or squash or pickleball. And it was very annoying. And then once I realized what he was dealing with, I realized that I have to step back and change my strategy and be a little bit more patient and do more hand-holding to make sure that you complete the deal. Ultimately, once we were under contract, my duty is for my sellers, because I was representing the sellers, to make sure that we have a transaction that's smooth and everybody ends up with a win-win situation. So this is kind of a prime example that I could have been a little bit more arrogant or, hey, you don't know this, you need to do this. It was tough. Yes, you have to push a little harder, but at the same time, I also didn't want to become disrespectful and create a situation that could have been jeopardizing the successful outcome of this transaction.
Yeah, don't judge until you understand and show respect until you find out the real reason behind that behavior. A tough lesson to learn, but once you've gone through it, you can apply it to future situations as well. I do like that. All right, moving along to lesson number 2. Have fun with what you do, but don't be afraid to fight for your dreams. What are your thoughts about that?
So I'd like to use this to kind of tell you a few different examples on how young people can be successful in buying real estate. Number 1 would be mine, where in 1988, I purchased my first home in Scottsdale, Arizona, using part of my tuition money. I also ended up getting some roommates who helped me pay for the rest of the tuition. So in a sense, I was able to buy a beautiful new house and they substituted my mortgage payments. I had a client a few years ago who had a very limited budget. She came to me and we were able to have her qualify for an FHA program, which only needed 3.5% of the purchase value. And we were able to find her a home. It was a condo. And we got it at a very good price because we found this for sale by owner who didn't really understand the value of the home. And also it wasn't advertised on the multiple listing service. So there was not much competition going after the property. So as soon as we closed on this property, she already had $30,000 of equity. And then over 2 years, she built up another 100,000. We ended up selling this property and she moved on to buying a single family home. She had more money, more equity, and going from a condo to a house was a huge relief for her. And then the third one where I had a friend whose daughter was moving to Arizona from Texas. Their goal was to stay within a 30-minute driving radius from her husband's work. That was a big challenge because she had limited funds. So that's when we came up with the phrase of drive until you qualify. We ended up moving her a little further away, about 42 minutes, but she was able to buy a beautiful place. And it was a single family home that was unattainable within that 30-mile driving radius. So in a sense, yeah, I have a dream, but sometimes you need to be realistic and make an adjustment.
Those are great tips for different scenarios for different people to build equity over time. You buy one house and maybe that's not your final house. And in most cases it isn't. You build that and indeed drive until you can afford it. Sometimes a little bit greater distance, you may find better prices. Once you are in that equity situation, you can build on it. I think that's very helpful in many real estate situations. So let's move along to question number 3. Don't assume things. Be factual and not fictional. I'm curious about your thoughts.
So I think especially in the electronic age, this is very, very important because it is so easy to verify information. Sometimes you get into these philosophical discussions and I like to just shut it down and say, yeah, but according to Google or according to this is information that's very important. And also, once again, in real estate, because you are basically helping people make one of the most expensive decisions in their life, when they come to you with questions, you cannot improvise. And especially, sometimes when you think about like, oh, what are the setbacks over here? Could I build a casita over here? I can never say, oh, yeah, that should be no problem. I have seen agents where you basically have to tell them to verify this information because this could cause some serious headaches for the sellers and the buyers later on. In real estate especially, but I also work for the Dial Corporation where we were making formulas. And over there, you cannot assume that a formula will stay stable. You basically test it and make sure that you don't assume anything. So you have to be very, very factual, especially in this time and age.
Now, is that a personal value that you hold dear, or is it something that other realtors apply as well?
So this is both my personal and professional belief. I have seen other agents, other people where they just kind of say things. I always try to have them slow down. It's all about the facts, not about fiction.
Lesson number 4, in any situation, never ever say you are confused. Always ask for clarification. That way, you make the opposite party look weak, not you.
Well, and my goal is not to make people look weak, but I learned this in a workshop at one of my former employers where they made this statement and I adapted it as one of my favorite philosophies. When you say, oh, I'm confused, it just makes you look weak. If you say, hey, I need clarification, and once again, it's not like I'm trying to belittle people, but sometimes when information is presented to you in an unorganized format, you need to push back. We need to be factual because it's very important transactions like in real estate. you are able to make sure that everybody understands what we are talking about. In real estate, we also say, if it wasn't in writing, it didn't happen. It's not in writing.
It has to stay within the contract, that commitment. But I think it makes sense what you're saying here. Being confused means it's sort of my problem. When you ask for clarification, that means you need more information, more data to make a decision, or at least to understand exactly what is going on. I think it makes a lot of sense. I hear what you're saying. It's not to make the other person look weak. It doesn't make you, in that sense, look weak. But if you ask for clarification, that I think is very powerful. I think it's a good lesson.
And it basically creates collaboration, because then once they start organizing their thoughts, they come back to you, then you can create more of a dialogue.
Let's move on. Lesson number 5. Surround yourself with people who inspire you and stay in touch with them over time. I'm curious about your thoughts behind that lesson.
I was super lucky over my lifetime, especially when I was playing music back in Hungary, or when I moved to the US. I got to meet so many amazing international and US students. When I worked in different corporations, it was sometimes such a blast going to work, especially in a cross functional group. I was always in sales and marketing, but it was fantastic to work with scientists, package engineers, and just kind of sit down and have them bring their knowledge to the table. It was always fascinating how we would attack a problem when everybody comes and they say, oh, we should do this. I always loved that creative process, but then also my goal over time was, how do I get to create a circle of friends, circle of acquaintances that will remain in my life? I think the easiest way of doing it is in social media. You have a distinction between LinkedIn and you also have Facebook. So LinkedIn is more like my professional contacts. In Facebook, you have more of your personal contacts. But over time, it is so easy to stay in touch with people. And sometimes when you pick up the phone and say hi or send a happy birthday note, just sending one little note can reignite a relationship and solidify these relationships that you have forged over time. In this time and age, it's so easy to do that. I love when I get a note from somebody, or they respond to my note, or get a phone call out of the blue and say, hey, man, I miss you. What's going on? Phenomenal.
Do you keep track of people's birthdays or other events?
Yes. I'm definitely into because just think about it. When your birthday comes, it's a special day. You wake up, and especially because I live in Arizona, but I have friends in Europe.
Absolutely.
In Asia, Australia. Already things start coming in the day before my birthday, and they still keep coming in the day after. And it's just phenomenal. And you are looking at it like, oh my gosh, I have best wishes from 4 different continents. How cool is that? I know that makes me feel very happy. That's why I put a big emphasis on reaching out to people. And sometimes it's not even a birthday, but you see a post and say, hey, you are going there. Or sometimes people reach out to me. They're like, hey, I'm going to Budapest. Could you help me? I actually put together a pretty robust presentation on like, hey, if I was there with you, this is what I would have you see. So it's always fun.
That's very kind. We are speaking today with Attila Juhasz, a successful luxury certified real estate agent in Scottsdale, Arizona. Born and raised in Hungary, Attila is sharing his list with his 10 lessons learned. I want to thank our affiliate partner, Audible. Audible is an amazing way to experience our program, 10 Lessons Learned, but also books and other podcasts, allowing you to build a library of knowledge all in one place. You can start your free 30-day trial by going to audibletrial.com/10 lessons learned. Again, that's audibletrial.com, 10 lessons learned, to get your free 30-day subscription. Moving on, lesson number 6. Don't procrastinate and be proactive instead of reactive. What are your thoughts?
I learned this in college. You know, like if you think back and you had the term papers or different papers hanging over your head. I remember at the beginning, I was dreading like, oh, I need to sit down. One of the things that was super motivational, I would go to the library, because you are sitting in the library, you look around and you're like, oh, we're studying. So it was always very motivational. And then you still have to do it. But if you are just procrastinating and dragging it's almost like a pain that's eating your body away. At one point, I said, this has to be done. I just need to jump on it. So I started becoming more proactive. Once again, being proactive, even in real estate, it's like when you are thinking about what could go wrong, mentally you put up these scenarios and have solutions. Like if option A is not working out, then we're gonna do B. So this really helped me become better, because it's not like, oh, suddenly something went wrong. It's so much harder to put out fires than go to the partners in a transaction and say, I'm kind of worried about this. Can we sit down, put our heads together, and how are we going to make sure that we avoid situation A, B, and C, and we're gonna successfully close the transaction?
Is that something that you have learned, or is it something that has been part of you your whole life?
I'm actually not as good as writing notes as I should be. I try to have my calendar super organized, but luckily my brain is still functioning really well. A lot of times I have these mental checklists. I wake up in the morning and it's like, okay, before my coffee, my brain already starts going off like, oh, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. I'm still doing it mentally, but also sometimes creating a checklist. They even say that it has a hormonal effect in your mind when you have a checklist, and the satisfaction of crossing things off the list is very satisfying experience.
Yeah, I mean, we could have a long conversation just about those issues. Let's move on. Lesson number 7. I'm very curious, based on some of the other things you talked about. Lesson number 7, don't burn any bridges. What is the meaning to you for that?
So in my corporate life, I had been in many different industries. Sometimes when you are leaving one industry and you are not returning, there were some employees that rub you the wrong way. You could have the satisfaction of going up to somebody and telling them off, but why would you do that? They probably did things beyond your comprehension, and it doesn't serve any purpose. Sometimes later in life, maybe you realize that maybe you are the one that was wrong and they were right. I just don't believe in burning any bridges. Even when you leave a relationship, you leave a job, it's just, remain cordial and keep those relationships alive. And if you don't like the relationship, then you don't keep it alive. But just don't rush into somebody's office and say, oh, but you did this and this and this and you hurt my feelings. It's not gonna make you feel better, and it's certainly just better just to basically bury it and just let it be.
How would you respond to a situation where someone is not satisfied with whatever they think you didn't do or did do, etc.? How do you deal with that?
Well, if somebody is attacking me, I want to make sure that I dig deep, because everybody can make mistakes. If I make a mistake, I will be the first to admit it. If I find out that I am able to substantiate what I have done and I'm a firm believer that I did everything right, then I push back, but in a cordial way. And once again, it goes back to be factual.
Yeah.
If you are able to present those, they still think you have done something wrong. That's when you put up your hands and it's like, sorry, I've done everything I could have. Here are the facts. If you feel a different way, that's not on me.
Rise above it. I like it. Makes sense to me. Lesson number 8, keep your emotions in check and only quit a job if you have another one lined up.
So I learned this from my wife, because I think as I age, I become less and less emotional. Early in my career, I was young and a little bit more hot-headed, and sometimes I had situations where I really had to sit down, take a few breaths, and just say, this is not worth it. I have adapted this strategy over time. If I get upset, I just basically take some time and really calm down emotionally and organize my thoughts, because it can help you on the long run.
Of course, there are situations where your personal financial situation is, let's say, if you have a lot of money in your bank account and you are working in an organization and you're not really happy there, why not get up and leave and get out of there? Why would you stay on? Or are you saying, well, it depends on the situation?
Well, once again, money is not everything. So if you are absolutely miserable and you have a cushion to fall back on, it's up to the listener to decide that, hey, I want to do this. But I always feel like even if you have the money and then suddenly you are not doing anything, 4 or 5 days is max for me to turn off my mind. But if suddenly you are not doing anything, and even though you have the financial means to fall back on, then suddenly your mind can turn against you, and you have this dark or drunk monkey in the back of your head that basically starts eating away at your self-confidence. I think it can be negative just to not do anything. It's just, maybe it's me, but I don't know how to just stay inactive. I'm like a shark. I have to keep moving.
No, I appreciate it. It's indeed your personal strength, but it is a lesson for other people to learn from and to keep your emotions in check. I think the wise lesson to learn and apply, and definitely not always easy, but a good lesson. Lesson number 9, stay active both mentally and physically to help you perform at your optimum. What do you do to stay fit yourself?
My metabolism took a sabbatical a few years ago, but I really like racket sports. Last night I was playing doubles tennis. Tonight I'm playing pickleball. On Saturday I was playing squash because in Arizona it's getting very toasty. It was nice to go inside an air-conditioned building and play squash. My favorite sports are definitely racket sports because sometimes you only need an additional person to play with. Sometimes it's doubles, but it's also a great way to meet interesting people. And even in real estate, my tennis and pickleball has led to many transactions because you get to meet people. As you become a part of a group, you become the real estate expert and people come to you and sometimes just getting an update. You have no intentions of selling, but I always found that especially when doing sports and competitive sports, it really helps you stay on the edge. I'm a very competitive person. It's not like there is any money on the table, but even last night I was running my heart out in temperatures around 105 degrees. So yeah, I could be in a swimming pool swimming, but then I'm just me against the clock, and this way I'm playing against people. You have that camaraderie, and it's really fun. When it comes to mental challenges, I have a fetish for Sudoku. I just get a kick out of it. It's like, yeah, it's an exercise for your brain.
Yeah, I hear you. And I can see in agreement that staying mentally and physically fit is extremely important. At the same time, I think we both understand sometimes people are not in a position to be physically or mentally fit. And it could be related to a number of things. They have to struggle through it. The goal is to stay mentally and physically fit. But we have to understand that sometimes people don't have a choice. And that's a tough one. Let's move on. Lesson number 10, my friend. Never stop learning. Even if you are an expert in your field, look for improvements or check out best practices from other industries that might help you get to the next level.
So I always had a thirst for knowledge. I was living in Hungary. I was 16 and I was playing music with other musicians that were 27, 28, and they have already progressed a lot further in their career. I would go to these practices and people would say, hey, do you want to join our band? At one point I was playing in 2 different bands and I could have decided to be a rock star for the rest of my life. That was fun for that moment, but I always thought I wanted to learn more. That's why when I did my undergrad in marketing with a international focus, that was great. But then I also met some people who did the ASU Thunderbird dual program back in the 90s. And I got to visit the Thunderbird campus and I realized how I always had an international calling. In undergrad, I came from Europe. I was living in the States, so my studies were focusing on Asia. When I went to Thunderbird, it was great to be surrounded by so many students from different cultures. I love the whole cross-cultural communication and hanging out with people with different backgrounds. I always knew that was something that made me very happy. I did undergrad, then my master's, and even when I moved from industry to industry, at one point you kind of get to the point where maybe you are one of the smartest people in the room. And I ended up changing industries because I always wanted to experience more. And then when I got into real estate, initially I started out as just a real estate agent. And then once you put in 3 years, you are able to go and get your broker's license. Most people do it just because they want to open their own brokerage, but that was not my goal, because then you have to deal with other paperwork and different clerical things that are not really my forte. But I decided to do my broker's license, and it was great because it gave me a deeper understanding of the real estate business, and that also helped me serve my clients, because the more you know, the better you can help people. But I always like to say, the more you know, the more you realize how little you know. Because imagine it's like a circle. The information you know, when the circle is expanding, the parameter of the circle is getting larger and larger, and you're like, oh, wow.
I think you share that wisdom with Socrates, the Greek philosopher. Absolutely. It's full of wisdom. Very interesting. I am curious. We've listened to the 10 lessons that you have learned. Curious, Attila, is there a lesson in life that you have unlearned, where you decided, I got to change, I got to do things differently? Anything that comes to mind?
If somebody looks at my LinkedIn profile, they will see that I've been in many different industries. I had the tendency to jump around because I need to be stimulated to remain interested. I feel like if I could have gone back as myself now and talk to the younger Attila and say, you know what, sometimes you need to just slow things down, give it a little more time, and if you really want to make a change, make a change. So I think maybe in the past I was a little jumpy, but I was young, full of energy, the world was out there was so much to see. It's almost like a little kid goes into a toy store and it's like, shiny toy, oh, I'm going faster.
Well, listen, Attila, I want to thank you for joining us today and for sharing your lessons and your wisdoms with our global audience. It's much appreciated. You have been listening to our international program, 10 Lessons Learned. This episode is produced by Robert Hossery, and we are supported by the Professional Development Forum. Our guest today is Attila Juhasz, sharing his 10 lessons learned. And to our audience, don't forget to leave us a review or a comment. You can also email us at podcast@10lessonslearned.com. I hope you will subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And remember, this is a podcast that makes the world wiser and wiser, lesson by lesson. Thank you, and stay safe.